But tonight we're going to talk about this idea of forgiveness under the title or question, how many times? And so here's a question to start us out, and the question is this. When is a time that you messed up and had to ask for forgiveness? So who wants to be real and transparent? When's the time you messed up and you had to ask for forgiveness?
Every day with my
I'm
wife.
going to say every day.
As you walk in the door.
I'm sorry. Every day you just walk in and start apologizing. I don't know what I did, but I'm sorry for it, right? What else? Anybody else? Sometimes you messed up. What is like the best apology you've ever seen? You ever seen somebody just apologize really good?
Tears, man.
Tears. You know that they're,
Yeah.
you know they've really done it then if you can hear the tears. Or like, maybe like if you've had a dog, you like immediately know, I don't know what you did wrong, but I know you did something just because they have that guilty look, you know?
That's the way my dog looks at me every day.
Have you seen those like videos of the people who record their dogs and they're like, who ate the trash or who got in the trash, and they'll like look away every time, like the guilt or shame that's on their face. So tonight we're going to look at a parable. It's called the parable of the unforgiving slave. And we're going to see 6 different characteristics. 3 will be characteristics that of unforgiveness, and 3 will be of forgiveness. And so these verses are on the back of your sheet. It says this: Then Peter came to him, that being Jesus, and said, Lord, how many times could my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? I tell you, not as many as 7, Jesus said to him, but 70 times 7. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who wanted to settle his accounts with his slaves. When he began to settle accounts, one who owed 10,000 talents was brought before him. Since he had no way to pay it back, his master commanded that he, his wife, his children, and everything he had be sold to pay the debt. At this, the slave fell face down before him and said, Be patient with me, and I'll pay you everything. Then the master of the slave had compassion and released him and forgave him the loan. But the slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and started choking him and said, Pay what you owe. At this, his fellow slave fell down and began begging him, Be patient with me and I'll pay you back. But he wasn't willing. On the contrary, he went and threw him into prison until he could pay what was owed. When the other slaves saw what had taken place, they were deeply distressed and went and reported to their master everything that had happened. Then after he had summoned him, his master said to him, You wicked slave, I forgave you all of that debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have also had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you? And his master got angry and handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay everything that was owed. So my heavenly Father will also do to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from his heart. So we'll start out talking about the 3 characteristics of unforgiveness. And the first thing to see about unforgiveness is unforgiveness gives a false framework. Unforgiveness gives a false framework. So what is your initial reaction when someone does something wrong to you? How do you normally respond when somebody does something wrong to you?
Man, initially, you got a little bit of anger.
You're angry about it, you're upset, you don't like it,
Very defensive about it.
you get defensive.
Kind of put your guard up.
Yeah. Maybe there's some shock that happens to it. You're like, I can't believe this is happening to me. That turns into anger, that turns into maybe revenge. You want to get even, you want to settle the score, you want to make the wrong right. So Peter, we see Peter throughout the Bible. He's always the one that either hits home runs or like strikes out. Like Peter never hits a single when it comes to like doing things for Jesus. Like he's either got it 100% right or 100% wrong. Like Jesus is either like saying, hey, good job, Peter, or he's like, you've done stuck your foot in your mouth again. And so this is one of those, Peter thought, man, I'm really going to be something big here, because Peter comes to Jesus and he asks him, if my brother sins against me, how many times should I forgive him? 7 times? Which in our day and age, there are several different things we'll talk through in this parable that doesn't really translate to our culture like it would their culture. And we'll kind of walk through those. But one of those is, in Jewish culture, it was kind of a custom that if somebody sinned against you or wronged you, you were supposed to forgive them at least 3 times. That was just part of the culture. 3 times you were supposed to forgive them, just out of the culture respect, to give them a chance to right themselves. But after the 4th time, culture pretty much showed, look, this person is not going to do the right thing, and so you don't culturally have to forgive them anymore after the 4th time. So Peter saying 7 times was really saying, like, over 2 times what culture would say is appropriate. Is that how many times, Jesus, I'm supposed to forgive somebody? And kind of in this idea of having unforgiveness in your heart or in your life, you come to Jesus, you even come to others with the wrong framework or really mindset from the very beginning on the relation that you're supposed to have with other people. Because Jesus says, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And different translations talk, is Jesus talking about 70 times? Is it talking about over 400 times? And I've always heard it go back to, if you're trying to do the math in that, you're missing the point of what Jesus is saying here. Jesus is saying in this that the framework of your mindset is supposed to be that if a brother or sister offends you, you're supposed to do everything in your power to make it right with them. Whether it's 1 time, whether it's 7 times, whether it seems like it's an everyday thing, on your behalf, you're supposed to be on good terms with people. And so this unforgiving mindset, though, it makes you approach the whole equation wrong. You have the wrong framework going into it because you keep score. And the Bible tells us that love doesn't keep a record of wrong, right? And so if we're supposed to love God and love others, then we don't have this scoreboard up there. We're like, man, look how many times they've done these things. Look how many times they've hurt me. Look how many times they've said this about me. And so that unforgiving attitude that can creep into our lives, it can start making us bitter toward other people or angry toward other people. It all comes back to this idea of having a false framework from the very beginning. That same framework that Peter did. Well, the world would have already cast this person off, and I'd give them double chances that the world would have ever given them. And that's not saying that you let people run over you. That's not saying that you become a doormat to people. But it's just saying that in your heart, you forgive them, whether you continue to allow influence in their life. That's not the point. The point is it's all about your heart and your attitude toward them, in the fact of, are you going to be bitter and unforgiving, or are you going to have forgiveness towards them? And so the first thing is this framework of unforgiveness. The second is unforgiveness gives an ability to forget. Unforgiveness gives us this ability to forget. So how does unforgiveness change our perspective on our lives? So if you're not thankful, or if you're not forgiving to other people, how can you kind of have, let's say, like an amnesia in your life about things that happen? Or do you think it does?
It's hard to ever get closure. Something that kind of just sticks with you forever. You don't forgive and forget. I mean, that's easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
There's
Just
a
going back
bitterness
to
there.
Just bitterness creeps in. You start losing joy in things. You stop being able to see the good in other people. And so you see when that happens, people are like, well, you're always like this. They just always do this. Every time that something happens, bad things happen. And you start, when you get in this mindset of not being forgiving to others, or wanting to hold a grudge or make people pay, that you forget all the good that is out there, or the good that is in other people. And we see, like, all right, so here's another part of the culture thing breakdown that we don't really understand. So it says that this guy owed 10,000 talents. Now, the talent was the highest currency that they had. And 10,000 was the highest number in their language. And so literally, it's saying of the highest money and the highest thing that you could ever imagine, that's what this guy owed. But even if we were to break down the money worth of what this is, so it said that the slave that, like the slave that owed the slave that was free, that owned 100 denarii, the little bit that was owed. A denarii, let's just say it would be a day's wage. So he owed him about 100 days worth of work. So I mean, he could work that off in a little over 3 months, right? That guy owed him a little over 3 months worth of work. Well, a talent was 6,000 denarii. So if he owed him 10,000 talents, then he owed him 60 million days of work, or 164,383 and a half years of work is what the slave owed this king or his master. Pretty much saying you couldn't pay off the debt that he owed in a million years. Pretty much is what they were saying. It would be like saying that someone that worked at Leroy Samir had to pay off our national debt. It's impossible. They can never do it. Somebody who mows yards has to pay you just can't do it. It's an impossible task, is what they're trying to set up to you. You can see, okay, if I owe 100 days of work, I can get that done. That's something that you can reasonably do. But here this guy had he could have worked 1,000 lifetimes and not paid off, 100,000 lifetimes and not paid off his debt. And in the custom of that day, if you couldn't pay off your debt, then everything that was attributed or was connected to you could be sold into slavery to pay off your debt. So it said that he was going to be sold, all of his assets, his land, his home would be sold, his family would be sold, all to pay off his debt. Literally, his kids and his kids' kids and his kids' kids' kids would be in slavery because of the debt that he owed. And so he falls before this master and he begs and pleads with him, I'll pay it back. And the master says to him, you know what? I'm going to have mercy on you. That literally your million year of debt is done. You're a free man. You can go. And the first thing that guy does, after being cleared of a debt that literally no way he could pay, he goes to a guy who owes him 3 months of work and says, you owe me this money, give me what's mine. And he receives the same plea that he just gave. Have mercy on me. I'll work to pay it off. And he says, nope, not going to have mercy. You're thrown in jail until you can pay it off. He forgot, because of the unforgiveness of his heart, the unforgiveness in his heart, that even though he was forgiven, he had this ability to forget how the same compassion should be shown to others. And the whole thing in this story is, we have been shown the same forgiveness from God. The sin in our life was a debt that in 100,000 lifetimes we couldn't pay. We couldn't work off. There was nothing that we could do to be forgiven from God. But yet, God, the creator of everything, our King, looked down on us, and in our repentant heart, when we say, God, there's nothing I can do, please forgive me, He forgave us of that debt and wiped it clean, set us free. And so in the same way that we've been set free and we should go live free, we shouldn't be like this forgetful slave to our fellow brothers and sisters and say, you know what, I've been forgiven all of this from God. God has forgiven me even though every single day I do stuff against Him and I owe a debt I couldn't pay. But you've done this little thing in my life, or even if you've done this big thing in my life, we've been forgiven way more than anybody could ever wrong against us. And we can't forget that we're supposed to have that same compassion to other people that God has shown to us. And so, but it's easy to have that ability to forget. It's easy to want to lord over other people their mistakes and their wrongs and their failures, and to forget to try to look for the good in other people. Because, I mean, if you look at people around you and you just remember the history of your life, it's easy to remember how many people have let you down, how many people have betrayed you. You turn on the news and you just hear of violence and murders and killings and wars, and it just seems like, is there any good left in the world? And it's very easy to have a cynical outlook on life. It's difficult to have a forgiving, compassionate demeanor or focus when you look to other people. But one thing we can't do is allow unforgiveness to come into our life and us forget how much we've been forgiven if we're a Christian. And then forget to share that compassion with other people. So unforgiveness gives us a false framework to work with. Unforgiveness gives us an ability to forget. Thirdly, unforgiveness forfeits our blessings. So this guy was unforgiven after he had been forgiven 100,000 lifetimes of debt that he owed. and he was unforgiving to a God who owed him 100 days worth of work, we see that he's not thrown back into slavery. So it's again like the idea of you don't lose your salvation if you are unforgiving to other people. But it's this idea that he was pretty much like the guy threw him in jail and was like, you know what, you're not going to do this. And it's pretty much the idea of God will remove his hand of blessing from our life if we're not obedient to him. God doesn't bless disobedience. And so while, yes, we're still saved and Christians and Christ followers, Christ can remove that hand of blessing from our life and say, you know what, I'm not going to give you all of the opportunity and blessings you could have had if you were obedient and faithful to the calling that I had before you. And we see this happen throughout the Bible where there were people who maybe were following God for a while. Saul, for example, like in Israel. Saul was the king of Israel and he had all these things. But we see that time and time again, Saul did things out of obligation, rather obedience to God. And the Bible tells us that God removed the hand of blessing from his life, and he even told Saul, Saul, the kingdom has been removed from you because of your disobedience. If this wouldn't have happened, I would have established my rule and reign through you, but because of your disobedient heart, I've now removed my hand of blessing from you. And I feel like that can happen in our life too. God has such plans and purposes, but that's where the free will of our life comes in. While God has a plan and a purpose for our life, we still have the choice to follow him or not. We have the choice every single day if we're going to wake up and be obedient followers of God or if we're not. And in this idea, if we hold bitterness and anger against our brothers or our sisters or just even strangers in our life, and if we just don't treat them with the love that we're supposed to have, Jesus said that the greatest command was to love God and to love others. And it even goes as far as to say, love your neighbor as yourself. And there's nobody in the world we love more than ourselves. And so we forgive ourselves a lot. I am more lenient with myself than I am with anybody else. I can make excuses for myself like no other. And yet we won't allow other people in our life to come back into our life because of that bitterness or that anger. Nope, you've hurt me before, I'm putting my walls up, I'll never let that wall down for you again. And unforgiveness, it forfeits our blessings. I feel like God is like, if you're not going to be obedient in the relationships that I've placed, why would I give you more opportunities to lead from me? If you're not going to lead over what I've given you already, why would I give you more opportunities to lead? You're not even being faithful with the people I've put in your life. Why would I put more people in your life? And so unforgiveness forfeits our blessing. So what does forgiveness do then? If unforgiveness will do these three negative things in our life, what does forgiveness? What if we say we're not going to be like that unforgiving slave? What do we see forgiveness do? Well, we see that forgiveness forms a new mindset. So why do we need to reset our minds sometimes? Why do we need to reset our minds?
You'll be stuck on that same loop and not even realize that you're stuck on that same loop. Mm-hmm. And you keep doing the same thing over and over again. I've done it before, not even realizing that you're doing it. You just take the time to reform your mindset. You can look at things a different way. You can act a different way.
Yeah, like you said, just stuck on that loop. We're going through a series right now on Sunday mornings called Reboot. And it's all along this idea, and Rocky could probably attest to this being in IT. Like 70% of the problems of computers, if you restart it, will fix themselves. Most of the time, if you just restart or unplug and plug it back in, that's my go-to first every time. Because if a computer gets running for so long, and even your phones will do this, it just seems like it gets on something, a program or whatever, and it just lags and freezes. But once you reboot it, it just has a chance to get started back up, or maybe upgrade update a software thing or something. It starts working a lot faster, starts moving how it was designed to work. And the same is true in our life. There are times when we just kind of need to reboot our software or just start over in our mindset and start over in our thinking. And I hope that things like this on a Tuesday night that's different than your typical Monday and Wednesday helps us do that. things like conferences and revivals, and just any time that you intentionally go before God out of the normal routine gives you the opportunity. You could even do a new or a refreshing Bible study on your own. Listen to a podcast, listen to something on YouTube, whatever it is. Listen to praise and worship music in your car. Whatever it is to start forming a new mindset in your life. And what forgiveness does is forgiveness is so far outside of our normal default setting, because we do, just as sinful human beings, want to get even with other people. That when we forgive people that have hurt us, even people who have really hurt us, even if we never vocally forgive them of that, if we just in our heart forgive them, it's like it frees us to get out of that funk, out of that mindset of just hatred. You know, I've always heard that like holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Like, it doesn't make sense, but we do that so many times. We think if I'm just angry and bitter toward them, man, I'm really going to show them. And most of the time, they don't even know.
It affects you more.
Yeah, it's going to affect you way more than it affects them. And so if you do, whether you vocally forgive them, maybe that needs to be something you do to help you get over that. You just vocally tell somebody, you know what? You maybe didn't even know this, but something you did, something you said, it really impacted me. And, you know, I just want you to know, even though you may not have meant to do it, like, I forgive you and I want to move on. Or maybe it's just in your heart, you say, you know what, I'm going to give this person another chance. I'm going to forgive them. And it reboots your mind, because it's just so different than the norm of what your body or even your heart wants to do sometimes. And so it helps form a new mindset. Number 5, or number 2 in the unforgiveness, or in the forgiveness, is forgiveness finds better motives. So how, and we've talked about this, how does forgiveness give us a better default reaction? But in this idea, it changes the motives of how we approach other people. It makes us seek after the good in people rather than having that unforgiving spirit in our life. The more we allow forgiveness, and the more that we allow God and His forgiveness to impact our lives, the more willing that we're going to want to find opportunities to make things right with other people. To be bridge builders rather than just build up walls between us and other people. How can I mend relationships in my own life? How can I help people mend relationships in their lives instead of building these walls? Because it's really easy to put your walls up, to stand guard, and to say, I've been hurt before, so I'm never going to be hurt again. And so by doing that, I'm not going to allow anybody to truly see me for who I am. Or I'm not going to let anybody in, because the last time I let somebody in, I got hurt. And so we never forgive, and because of that, because we suppress our emotions so much, we never really truly live anymore. We never truly function how we should function. And so forgiveness, it finds better motives of our life. It gives us better opportunities. It gives us better ways to move. And then lastly, forgiveness frees us to move forward. It frees us to move forward. So the opposite of unforgiveness, this slave who was unforgiving, says he was thrown back in jail. The guy was like, I'm not going to let you treat your fellow slave like this. You've been forgiven so much, and yet you're willing to be so petty over so little. And I fear that we treat other people that way in our lives so many times. And I mean, it's easy. It's easy to feel entitled, like you're owed something. And like I said, this is not a lesson in saying be a doormat to the world. I don't feel like that's biblical at all. You're not supposed to just get ran over. But in your heart, are you a person that is going to allow unforgiveness that will lead to bitterness, that will lead to whatever, sin really, in your life? Or will you say, my default setting is going to be forgiving, and to building that bridge, and to really going back to remembering what God has done for me? Because unforgiveness, like we said in the second point, leads to forgetting. If we start forgetting the good in other people, we start forgetting the good in God too. And it's so easy to approach our relationship with God and things in life happens, and then we hold a grudge and unforgiveness to God. And we say, well, God, why would you allow that to happen in my life? God, why would you let that person die? Why would you let that person hurt me? Why would you let this situation happen? And just like we're unforgiving to other people, we start holding grudges against God. And we start treating him like he's not perfect and omniscient and knows everything. And even though what happened in our life could be tough and difficult, we start getting bitter against God. And that's what happens when we allow unforgiveness to creep into our life. And we'll kind of piggyback off of that next week in being thankful. But if you're not grateful for the things in your life, and you're not forgiving in your life, then that will lead to you can never truly be thankful for anything in your life. You'll never be able to appreciate anything. You will walk through life, but you'll walk through life like a zombie. You'll never truly live. You'll never truly be able to love. You'll never truly be able to appreciate anything. And I kind of talked about this Sunday night, preached Sunday night before the church. And this idea is so true. And it's that, and we talked about this just right before, what the deadly sins were. But like greed and lust and envy and all of these different things, those are, it says, the works of the flesh. Pretty much what your sin nature will lead you to do. And the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the fruits of the Spirit. And you can't fake the fruits of the Spirit. You can fake happiness, you can't fake joy. You can fake putting on a smile, you can't fake peace. True peace. You can't fake true love. And all of that stems from this idea of, God, I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to be in relationship with you, and I'm going to work through you. And in that, part of that is being forgiving to other people. If you don't truly forgive other people, then you can't receive the fruits of that, which is of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, and all of those things. So it'll impact literally every part of your life. And it'll really, I think, physically, spiritually, emotionally, it will not only drain you, but it'll destroy you. It'll keep you from really truly being able to live. And so, while it seems so small, this idea of forgiveness is so important in our life.